Okay, I think we're going to get started now. My name is Jen Mates. I'm the Assistant Town Engineer. I want to thank you guys all for coming out this evening. We're here tonight to talk about the Salem Street Area Utility Improvement Project. We're very early in the design. We really are just gathering information at this point, and that's what we want this meeting to be, is getting input from the residents about any issues you may know of in the area that you see need to be addressed relative to utilities, and any other ideas that you want to discuss about the neighborhood. So I'm going to step back a little and say this project was approved last March at the town meeting for the design portion of the project. Public Works went through a selection process and selected Hoyle Tanner Associates for the design engineers for the project. I'm going to let them go through and introduce themselves.
All right, Joe Ducharme, Hoyle Tanner.
Nicole Davis, Hoyle Tanner.
Steve Haas, Hoyle Tanner.
Raquel Gibson.
So like I said, we're really here to get input from you folks, but we do want to do a quick little overview of the steps that we're going to be taking through the design process and leading up to construction. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Nicole.
Thank you very much. I'll mimic what Jen said and thank everybody for coming out. We are looking for as much feedback kind of early on in this process as possible. So if you have any feedback throughout the duration, there is some contact information at the end that you can reach out to any one of us at any time. So quickly, we just went through introductions. Joe is the project manager on this project. I'm going to be doing some public outreach, so we do have a Facebook group set up. If you haven't joined that, feel free to join that and join the dialogue in there. Steve Haas is handling the roadway and the drainage, and then Raquel is the utilities engineer on this project, and Jen Mates is the project manager from the town. If you didn't when you came in, there is a survey. We're asking everybody to complete that. That will also be available online for any of your residents any of your neighbors who weren't able to make it tonight, so that way we can get as much feedback from everybody regarding any concerns or issues that they may be experiencing in the neighborhood. So feel free to share with your neighbors who maybe weren't able to make it tonight the availability of this survey online. So this is just an overview. So we are going to be doing drainage, sewer, and water improvements throughout the areas that you see in blue. Some areas will have water, some will have sewer, some will have both, and then some also have some drainage structure improvements as well. So this is just an overview in GIS of your of the neighborhood. So this is the same area that we just showed in the previous map. And if you look at the map, you'll see that there's green and magenta, and there's also some blue up there. That's indicating what you have out there existing for utilities. So with that, I will turn that over to Raquel and let her talk a little bit about the utilities.
Thank you, Nicole. No, I'm all set. Okay, so actually I will take that since I need to scan through. So these are the existing neighborhood utilities in your area. Like Nicole said, pink, blue, and green for the drainage, sewer, and water. So these are the main driving factors for this project, is the water, the sewer, and some of the drainage structures in this region. A lot of the water mains in this area are very old, some of them circa 1800s, some of them a little bit newer. You have various types of materials for your water lines. And various sizes. Several of them would be considered undersized by our current design standards. So some of the improvements that we'll be looking to do in this project, improving your water pressure, improving your flow rates, improving water quantity. So we'll be upsizing those mains, using more modern materials for your water mains. Improving the reliability. Like I said, a lot of these lines are quite old. Cast iron can be pretty fragile. So although there hasn't been any significant breaks to date, cast iron is fragile, so it's a possibility. So we want to look to try to, make sure that the new pipes are going to be withstanding the next 100 years. And then just in general, we're improving water quality, and that may include just upsizing the mains or new materials. It also may include connecting dead-end water lines to improve water flow through the area. And then for the sewer improvements, we're looking to reduce backups. Our understanding is that there's been a few issues in the area, so we'd like to eliminate those. The sewer mains that are out there right now are largely clay pipe, which is an older material. It leads to a lot of inflow and infiltration from groundwater. So we're looking to reduce that inflow and infiltration by replacing those old pipes, getting rid of the breaks that are currently in the pipes, and replacing them with new, and then just improve general sustainability of the sewer mains.
Can you just clarify or define what inflow is?
So inflow is if you have a sump pump in your house that goes to the sewer lines, that's inflow. Infiltration is when the groundwater seeps in through cracks in the pipes themselves. And now I'll pass it off to Steve.
Thank you, Raquel. Is there a pointer on this? Right there we go. All right, so as Raquel said, the main goal of the project is the water and sewer improvements that she's highlighted. The drainage is somewhat of a secondary improvement. However, there are some things the town's identified that they would like to look at improving. First and foremost being the catch basins. What you see up here, the top, is a drainage catch basin grate that you may see around the neighborhoods. There's these circular, smaller grates. These grates and the structure below it are rather small, not great for collecting water. They're also somewhat of a tripping hazard. If you were to walk or ride your bike over that, you may end up hurting yourself. The structure below it is small, as I said, generally like a 2x2 structure, whereas a more modern structure is a 4x4. Makes it somewhat difficult for maintenance to get in there and clean it out, repair it, and remove the sediment. They don't have what's known as a sump. That's this area below the outflow pipe in the structure. That's intended to allow the sediment and the sand and any other debris to collect in the bottom of the structure, and then the maintenance folks can get in there and clean out that structure before it washes down into the river and sediments and pollutes the rivers. And again, I mentioned maintenance. These larger structures are a lot easier for the crews to get in there and work on. So ultimately, we're replacing it to look something like these grates here, which there are some of those in the neighborhood as well. So the town has identified select structures around the project area that they'd like to have us look at and potentially replace. If there are other structures that you guys know that are in poor shape, please let us know on the survey, as well as any other ponding areas or other drainage concerns that you've seen where pipes may be backing up, so we can discuss those with the town and see if there's something that should be done as part of the project. From a drainage pipe perspective, some of the pipes out there are a bit older. There are some locations where it's actually the former sewer line when the sewer was replaced 30, 40 years ago. In many of those cases, they're what's known as vitrified clay pipe. This picture in the lower left-hand corner kind of shows one of those, and you can see this actually is cracked. So there are a few locations where there's cracks, there's blockages in these pipes. So we'll be looking at whether it makes sense to replace those as part of the project. Would be replaced with a more conventional style reinforced concrete pipe like you see there. Along with that, the town's going to be looking at ways that they may be able to improve stormwater quality. This little picture down here is a underground sand filter, just kind of a potential graphic of what one might look like. Basically, in this case, water comes in, is filtered, and then is cleaned before it is discharged into the rest of the stormwater system. So as part of the storms, the town rather, their MS4 or municipal separate storm sewer system, did I get that right? They're required to provide some level of treatment before the water is discharged out into the river. So they have to look for these opportunities to make stormwater improvements on these projects. So we'll be looking at areas where that may be able to be done, maybe in the roadway, or if there's any town property where they could locate one of these systems. So when it's all said and done, when the water's been repaired, when the sewer's been repaired, and any drainage improvements have been done, we will have trenched through the roadway. So then we have to look at how's that roadway going to be restored. On the left is a typical trench patch where the utility was underneath it and then the pavement was just repaired above it. Sorry, on the right rather. And on the left is your more conventional roadway replacement, pavement replacement, or overlay. So knowing that there's a lot of utilities out there, there's going to be a significant amount of disturbance to the road, so we will be working with the town to determine what's the best improvement. The town, it does recognize that the residents are concerned with what the final treatment is going to look like out there, so we'll be working closely with them to determine what the best course of action is when the project is done. With that, I will turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Steve. So for those of you who might have met with me over there, this is just a repeat of one of the boards we have over there. And the intent here is to just let everybody know that the town has been doing a lot of studies in the last 15 plus years to look at the age of the utilities, look at the condition of the utilities in town. They did a 2002 water system evaluation study, which included the treatment plant and distribution and storage. In 2009, they looked at the sanitary sewer, your wastewater sewer, and looked at an inflow and infiltration study throughout the town. And this neighborhood was identified as an area with sewers that were deficient. And in 2015, the town did a public water system asset management plan. The town has a hydraulic water model. The asset management plan also identified, as Raquel mentioned, that some of the water mains are smaller diameter, lower flow, not what we would put in today's world by design standards. So upsizing the pipes and taking care of some really old sections of main are really part of a town-wide plan. The CIP, the capital improvement plan that the town has, you know, if those of you who've lived here long enough and have looked and gone to town meetings to see what projects come up, this is a way for the town to replace all these old utilities, but do it methodically and over time. So this particular neighborhood and this project have been in the works, I think, since 2013 or 15 for this particular neighborhood project, but a lot of the study work was done long before that. Let's see, which one is up? This one? That one, thank you. One of the things you may have seen already, as Jen mentioned, we're really just getting started with this project. You may have seen some town crews out there painting on the pavement and locating water and sewer direction of flow and connections between certain points. You've probably already seen the surveyors out there. They did pick up some of the existing utility information already. They'll be back out there. There were some restrictions to the information they could get because of snow cover. Although the snow's receded a lot lately. A month ago when we got them going, there were snow banks along the edges of roads and at people's driveways and such. So we're starting to collect that information. So you've probably already seen utility markings, some ground survey. We do have plans as we break down some of the information we're gathering. We may find locations where we want to do a little subsurface information to see if we have any ledge or clay or whatever the soil types are. Also depending on where we might want to locate some new structures. So that may be happening in the spring. The Public Works crews have also let us know that as we review, the town has given us a lot of data. They've done a lot of work already, so we have a lot of the study information that we're reviewing. We have some videos of what we call CCTV, the closed circuit TV camera work in the drain lines and in the sewers. So we're breaking that down as well to study that. So if there's something we don't understand, we may have the town crews go out and help us and do some smoke testing, maybe some limited camera work to understand things a little better about the existing utilities. That also can tell us, inform us about, as we put the new utilities in, location, flow, direction, all that, and if there's opportunities to maybe change a few things out there to improve things. So you may see that, and you may see Raquel and Steve and I out there at some point, maybe all three of us together or two of us at a time, verifying some of this information that we get. Because as we plot things out and we read all these surveys that people have already filled out and hopefully more will, we'll start piecing all that information together. I'm sure we'll have questions. I've told some people in the room, I've been to the neighborhood 3 times, you live in it every day. So you're going to know it way better than me. So we'll be asking questions along the way. I did get a few questions on project schedule. So we are really just kicking off the project now. We're gathering information. We're going to be breaking that down, starting to work with Jen and others at the town to develop some preliminary layouts. We should have a preliminary design ready for Jen and her crew about the June time period. Summertime, probably end of summer, we'd like to have another neighborhood meeting to share what we've done, what we've put together, get more feedback. We would look to progress to a final design around the November timeframe, bid the project December, January, and have some bid numbers in before town meeting. This project, as Jen mentioned, with the engineering design was funded last year. As we go through the design and develop costs and scope and figure out the elements of the project, this project will be voted on next year at town meeting for construction. So this year is our design year. Next year would be the construction year. And then we would anticipate, if bids are favorable and it's voted in at town meeting, then construction would start spring of next year. And I've had a few questions about, can this project be done in one season? It's a really good question that I can't answer yet, because as we start developing our layouts and alignments for the utilities, it may be, one big section gets done one year, another section next year. It could be that the contractor brings out 2 crews and does the whole thing in 1 year. So it's hard to tell at this point until we get into design. So we're just getting started. Now, I'll share with everybody, I'm a dinosaur, I'm not on Facebook, so glad for those who know how to use it. My kids do it, I don't do it. But there are, in this presentation, Jen, would we want to put this presentation on the town's website? Okay. So there's ways to get information that, as Nicole mentioned, there's a Facebook group just for this project. The town's website also has an information page on the project, and we will be updating that information as we go forward. Jen is the town's project manager, is assistant town engineer. Nicole is our outreach coordinator, myself is the project manager. You can reach out to any one of us. Share information, get your neighbors to put information, out there. We'd love to hear from everybody because it's going to make for a better project. So, and with that, if there's any other questions, I know people have asked some really good questions at the boards. Question in the back.
So there's a mic over in the front here. If you'd like to use the mic, that would be terrific.
And that's for the recording, so the viewers at home have a question. You can introduce yourself.
Paul Velazquez, town engineer. You had up there subsurface investigations. Can you talk a little bit of what you may be doing with that?
Sure.
And when?
Yeah, good question. That for us is we typically would do a boring or a probe in the ground with a drill rig. And we would like to see where the groundwater is, for example, might be one piece of information. We'd like to see what the materials are below the pavement to understand, as Steve spoke about, pavement restoration. We'd like to know what we have for gravel materials and soils underneath the pavement. We may also, this area so far, in looking at some of the soil maps, the historic soil maps for the area, doesn't look like there's much ledge, but we deal with that often in New Hampshire. We're dealing with ledge profiles that vary throughout the course of a project. So any of that subsurface information on soils, groundwater, gravel materials, type of material, to understand what we'd be able to backfill into the trench, or that's the type of information we'd look. Timing-wise, we'd probably look at doing that this spring as well, to get that done early in the project, so that can inform us for our design.
Very good. Now you mentioned you were going to be formulating anticipated construction costs and that sort of thing. What is the price tag so far that the town has been carrying for the construction of the project?
Yep, good question. It's on the CIP board, and it's on one of the slides there. The total project cost, as it was put in the CIP, is $4.4 million. And right now, the engineering phase of that, with survey and everything, is $315,000. So that's off the 4.4, and about another $300,000 for engineering. So price tag for the construction is around 3.7 million.
Thank you.
Yep.
Eileen Flockhart. I've got 2 questions for you, but one probably is more specific to this project. Knowing that you're going to be digging down into areas where no one's dug for a while, and there are a number of very well-established significant trees. This one I mentioned to you is this really fine elm tree, which is on Salem Street. Others, there's a huge oak on the corner of Oak Street and Forest, and some other trees in the area that are really very special, and we'd like to hang on to them. And knowing when you dig down, there's disturbance to root systems. Is there a way that you can connect? I mean, as part of this newly formed tree committee in Exeter, we're very concerned about not only planting new trees, but protecting the ones that we have. Is there a way for you to know that you have access to an arborist or somebody who could come in when we start to look at stuff and say, okay, here's a corner with a serious big tree. There's another corner, here's 3 more over here, and have a look at it before you start digging.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jen. I don't know if that's ever happened in town before. Maybe it has. Could you speak to that for a minute, and then I'll speak on what we're doing on the design side.
So we have done that on previous projects. We did that on Lincoln Street. We had an arborist. We also had a landscape architect for that project because of all the streetscape work. But we did have an arborist come in and help us with some of the trees, both the new trees that were planted and some of the existing trees that there were services running almost directly below the tree, and let us know how best we can either trim branches to accomplish the work without the excavator damaging the tree, and how far off we should try to be to maintain them. Our goal is to have the smallest footprint possible when doing this construction, and most of the work will be within the existing limits of pavement. I think doing the services to the houses may be where we run into some roots, but we'll definitely consult a professional with some of those more sensitive trees.
Yeah, we would be just very thrilled to know that you would be taking the same kind of care with the stuff above the ground as the stuff under the ground, because those trees don't survive without their roots going happily underground.
And thank you, Jen. And that's a good question. And we talked earlier. And one of the things as we gather all this information and start to look at where the existing utilities are and where the opportunities are to put the new utilities, knowing that there's some trees that are of concern and sensitivity, to the community, we would look. As Jen mentioned, we try to stay within the confines of the pavement, and we have a requirement to separate water and sewer by 10 feet horizontally. But that doesn't mean we can't shift things, a little bit one way or the other. Generally the constraint for all of these projects ends up being the sewer, because we have to maintain a certain slope for gravity flow out of the neighborhood. But within certain bounds, we can certainly look at shifting things too. And it's good to know that. It's good to know that now before we start laying things out.
Yes, right. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you.
All right, my second question may not be your bailiwick at this point, but because you're going to be digging stuff up and the street's going to be redone, we've got a neighborhood here that you're working on that's right now full of a lot of young families and a lot of kids who walk to school. And over the years, we've been saying, could we please have some sidewalks? There's a couple of very heavily trafficked roadways that come right through this neighborhood. They come through the center areas of town and kind of take a shortcut to get to the highway. So they come zipping through this neighborhood, and kids walking to school. There are no sidewalks, and if there's a lot of snowbank and you come down there and somebody's flying by, I've walked my grandchildren down that Oak Street, and I look and say, okay, now there's a snowbank we can all jump into if we have to. But I shouldn't be saying that. I should be saying this is a nice, safe street where we can walk. So whether this becomes an additional project that we would like to propose for next year to say, as long as you're digging up the street, as long as you're going to need to repave it, can we look and see how something as uncomplicated as 1 or 2 little snippets of sidewalk, it's not a huge amount of space that needs to be paved to be safe, and the benefits for the safety of children, and we want to encourage kids to walk to school. We don't want to say everybody's got to get in a car to be safe to go somewhere. So if we could sort of throw that out, I'd be happy to leave this with you to just sort of take a look at our thoughts about it. And there's just really 3 little spots that could use some safety and sidewalks that would really ensure that it's not just for the kids walking. I'm a kid, okay? When I walk down that road, I would love a sidewalk because I don't want to have to be leaping off into a snowbank either. So, you know, I think just in terms of general safety and for a terrific neighborhood, it's a great neighborhood, and we'd like to be able to keep it that way. So,
Yeah.
if you just sort of throw that out for your consideration, but
Yeah,
I
good.
know that's not part of your project.
Yeah, good thoughts. I did want to just say for the record too, it was not built into the CIP
Yeah, no.
for the project, but thank you for bringing it up, and that's something we'll review with the town, absolutely, so.
Doug Flockhart, related to her. I want to say a little bit more emphatically than my wife did, that we want sidewalks. We want sidewalks as part of this project. And we don't want patched pavement when you're done. We want repaving of the streets. If this was High Street, which has sidewalks, and you did this kind of a project, you repave. If this was Pine Street, you would repave the whole street. They have sidewalks too, okay? We want equal treatment in this neighborhood. This is the kind of workforce neighborhood that everybody says, why don't we have more, why don't we have more? Well, you have one. And treat it with the same respect you give to those other streets.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, my name's Caroline Piper. I live on Forest Street. I'm curious about, Joe, you mentioned something about bringing the services to the houses, and I'm interested in finding out more about what is involved in terms of it leaving the roadway and coming to our homes, and, you know, the disruption to, you know, our individual pieces of property. And I know we had some upgrades in another part of town, and the homeowners were responsible for connecting into that new sewer line, and I'm curious if that's going to be the case in this project, or could you just talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah, good question. So the way the project was developed and budgeted, it's to bring the services to the edge of the right-of-way. And if the homeowner were to want to upgrade the service from the right-of-way to the home, that would be an expense for the homeowner. That's how it's budgeted today. Depending on feedback from the neighborhood, and I know we've talked about this with the town already, and as we start getting the survey and start developing the design layouts, I couldn't tell you today how many feet of service connection pipe there are, and for perhaps your property or another property, until we start looking at that layout. But we typically would bring everything to the edge of the right-of-way because that's what the town maintains. And then if an upgrade from the right-of-way to the foundation is desired, that cost is typically paid for by the homeowner.
So does that mean that all of the benefits that are the rationale for this project are not able to be realized by individual properties unless their pipes are of equal size or, you know, are somehow modified? Does it, if we choose not to make those upgrades, does that hamper the functionality of the water and the sewer that we have in the house now?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's hard for me to know what every
Sure.
service is and what the vintage of every house
Right.
is. If there's a 100-year-old house out there,
Let's assume, just for the purpose of this conversation, most of the houses in this section of town are
Yeah.
quite old and
Sure.
probably date to circa the original
World War
sewer
II
and
era, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, or the
Yeah.
1800s, and so let's assume that potentially the connections are original. So
Yeah.
whenever water
Yeah.
and sewer was available to the homes, those pipes have probably not been upgraded.
Yeah.
So let's assume worst case scenario.
yeah. Again, it depends on what was put in and when and what condition it's in, so it's hard for me to know.
Okay.
We've had projects in other areas of New England where there's been galvanized pipe, copper pipe, iron pipe as services. We've seen sewer services that are I think there's a trade name is called Bermico pipe, which is an asphalt impregnated cardboard that was popular post-World War II. It was very inexpensive. All of those pipes degrade over time. So the condition of those pipes, is unknown right now to the town or to me. But if that's a desire that the neighborhood has collectively, then maybe that's something the town would entertain and see. I mean, it's a big expense when you look at just doing the mainline pipes, but then now that means constructing on private property, which is also a different aspect for the town. Constructing in the right-of-way is one measure of liability, constructing on private property is another. Whether the town would consider it, and Exeter might have done it with some, other communities have done it where there's some cost sharing that's offered to make those improvements at the time of the project. That can be explored, but it's not built into the project today. Would it mean that everybody wouldn't get some benefit from the project? I would say there's still a benefit from the project, just to stop root intrusion in the sewers and blockages, to get rid of the inflow and infiltration to the wastewater plant. You're paying to treat clean water. To upgrade the flow and water quality in the neighborhood, I think would all be realized. If there's a pressure issue in a home because of a service line and not because of the main line, then that really is more of a private property issue than the town side.
And at what stage in the design and/or planning process would some assessment of those connectivity pieces start to be part of the puzzle, so that those of us, who are going to be impacted by this, start to have some, idea of what we're looking at in terms of cost, if it does fall to us exclusively?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And when I went through the schedule side, we would like to have another neighborhood meeting around the end of the summer, maybe July, August timeframe. And by then, we'll have some layouts of main lines. We'll then know where the service connection is going to the edge of the right-of-way. We'll be able to help define for everybody what that length of service would be on the private property. We'll start to be able to quantify that as we get farther in the design process. Okay. And so summertime, I think, would be about the time we'd be able to give you more information.
Okay.
And then also, looking at past projects and costs of doing those services, we can give everybody some idea what that service would cost.
A ballpark cost would be great, because as Doug alluded to, this is a workforce neighborhood. Lots of retirees and lots of working families. And
I live in one of those in Concord,
our taxes just
New
went up
Hampshire.
$300 a month this year. So the idea of
pain.
having to spend more to live in this town is starting to be a little untenable. Related to the age of the neighborhood and the streets, we have non-conforming streets sort of in every way, shape, or form. They're not straight, they're not uniform widths. As Eileen and Doug alluded to, we sort of have, it's not that we have no sidewalks, we don't have connected sidewalks. So one block will have a piece of old sidewalk, and then the next block has none, and the road sort of goes like this. So I'm curious, you mentioned that the project really is intended to stay within the confines of the existing pavement, but is there, how much in a historic neighborhood like this that has just sort of evolved like a cart path, can you talk a little bit about how you navigate through the impulse to, you're engineers, you like straight lines. So, how do you balance the maybe desire to, the pipes are straight, even though the road is not. There is an opportunity, and I would echo again, that would be a gigantic missed opportunity to not incorporate and to create a continuous, at least Oak and Salem Street. 2 of the blocks have sidewalks and the other 4 don't. The reason that this is not part of the capital improvement plan is that we have a town planner who does not care at all about the people who live in this neighborhood, and we have a planning board that is tone deaf. We have expressed this to the town, and nobody cares. And I realize that you guys are contractors, but as contextual information, the DPW has been fantastic, and they work for us, and recognize that and do a fantastic job.
Yeah.
The planning arm of this town has other priorities. So we are making our pitch to you because you are here tonight. But that's a little of the background. But back to the road irregularities. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Like I know Forest Street, starts out small and then sort of has this very awkwardly wide. And sometimes that's good, but sometimes that's bad. And I'm thinking about, I agree with Doug that, a nice, smooth, continuous piece of pavement would be delightful, but we already have a speeding issue in our neighborhood, and without curbs, without sidewalks, and without lines, I sort of am imagining that actually, like, continuing to have the street be oddly wide in places will exacerbate some of the problems that now, frankly, are moderated by some of the irregular patched pavement, which kind of slows people down. So
It's its own traffic calming.
yes, it does, this sort of inadvertent traffic calming device.
I'm going to turn this question over to Steve and Jen because I'm not a road designer, so.
Okay, thank you.
Take it first. So we did talk about this a little bit at our kickoff meeting for the project, and we were actually talking about potential ways to look at if there was ways to reduce the pavement width. Having to repave a wider road costs more than a narrower road. So we were going to look at areas where there was unnecessary pavement and see if it did make sense to try and pull that in. Some concerns that were raised by doing that, though, is if residents are using it for parking and other concerns. So that's something we did want to look at. The other thought is if you have a narrower road and not a sidewalk, potentially you're losing space where someone walking or biking down the road could find refuge.
Which would be solved if we added sidewalks.
Understood. So just to say that it's something we consider, and I don't think if we were to repave the road, we would look for every opportunity to make it uniform and not have it wiggle as best as possible. So
Great. And my last question, and I'll stop hogging the microphone. My neighbors know me well, so they don't mind. The right-of-way, that is on all of our properties, some of which have sidewalks and some of which don't. Just as sort of a general, construction expectation, I understand that, you're going to try to dig in the roadway itself, but obviously the equipment that's doing that digging, the people who are walking around and, monitoring it, just so we have sort of an expectation of, what's that buffer zone that we should make sure, for example, I have a beautiful flower garden that's planted in the right-of-way. I would love to be able to remove all of that and just sort of set my own expectation for, how much encroachment will this project have, just as a typical matter of, you got to walk somewhere and you have to, there is some overflow. Is it, I don't even know how big the right-of-way is. I mean, maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, I think it actually varies a little bit depending on which street you are in the neighborhood. But,
Okay.
That's a great question, and people will walk, will tend to walk on the grass to get out of the way of the equipment if they're observing or happen to be passing through that area where there's active construction. One of the things that we yet to receive from the surveyor is a lot of that surface information of flower beds, things that might be in the right-of-way, shrubs, maybe little stone walls or something. When we got them out there for the utility work, there was still a lot of snow banks and cover. So understanding those impacts, today I couldn't tell you in your specific area whether that would be impacted heavily or lightly, and that a part of that reason is we don't know exactly where the alignments of the main lines are going yet, and that factors in quite a bit.
Okay.
If you mentioned, I've driven through the neighborhood a few, and there are some areas where the pavement just grows. And I don't know, it goes from 22 feet wide to 38 or 40 feet wide. If we're able to keep the utilities more toward the center of the roadway, there may not be many impacts at all on the edges.
Okay.
But the alignment really drives a lot of that.
Okay.
And as we get more surface information and start to look at where we can put the new utilities, part of the challenge for the town and for us is to design a new replacement that allows the existing utilities to function while the new utilities are being installed. So that creates some challenges as well. But all that factors in. If we had to push, to avoid maybe really take the concern about some trees and say, well, we really need to push the utilities to one side of the road, well, those impacts off the road are going to be a little bit greater in that area. Can't answer that today, but that's as we get more design information together and have another meeting, we'll want to lay all these areas out and have the maps just like we have here, so you can all come and look at that and give us more feedback.
Okay, great, because this, as an old neighborhood, a lot of our homes are very close, you know, closer to the road than is traditional
Yeah.
in other kinds of neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So my house in particular is basically on the road, and so all of these ladies and gentlemen will be right outside my office when this happens. So it's of particular interest to me.
Yeah,
So
I'm
thank you very
sure
much,
it is.
everybody.
Thank you, good questions. Anyone else? All right, really appreciate the feedback. And again, there's ways to provide more feedback throughout this process. Share with your neighbors if you have neighbors you know or have certain concerns or interests and they weren't able to come tonight. Point them in this direction. Reach out to us. This is the data gathering phase, so thank you.
I thought I went onto the Facebook group for this, but I wasn't able to enter a comment. Was I doing something wrong?
Did you join the group, or did you have to click the join button, and then you can comment on it?
I would like to just add to what Eileen said about the trees. I want you to understand that we're not being arbitrary about we'll save all the trees, okay? There are some unique trees in this neighborhood, especially that elm, which is, as you all know, it came this close to extinction. And it's an incredibly fine specimen. So it's healthy.
Probably one of few in New England, right? Yeah, yeah. No, it's good. I mean, this is what this meeting's about, is hearing what concerns you, so.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of great information tonight. I
Yeah,
think.
already.
It's been very helpful.
Yeah.
All right, so
Good.
thank you all for coming out.
Thanks, everybody.